My mother and stepfather ignore me and leave me alone at home. The reason was terrible. When I was a teenager, my mom started dating a man named Steve. She was in a difficult situation at the time, and it seemed to her that this man could give her stability and a normal family. I, for my part, didn't mind. I just wanted my mom to be happy. But soon, things didn't go the way I expected. I tried not to interfere with their relationship, kept aside, and always behaved respectfully. Did not scandalize, did not conflict. But every day the situation grew more and more heated, and I found it harder to understand why Steve was so cold toward me. He avoided talking, did not answer my questions, looked at me like a ghost. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. At first, I thought it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe he wasn't used to a teenager in the house. Maybe he needed time to get used to me. But as time went on, his behavior became more and more aloof and sometimes hostile. He seemed to despise me, even though I gave him no reason to. I withdrew into myself, trying to analyze my behavior, searching within myself for the reason. What had I done wrong? Why did the man who seemed to love my mother treat me with such obvious contempt? When I couldn't keep quiet about it anymore, I asked my mom what was the matter, why Steve hated me so much. She reluctantly replied that I was making up nonsense, and Steve just wasn't used to me yet. As time went on, the situation only got worse, and now my mother was estranged from me as well, as soon as Steve brought her daughter from a previous marriage. They had their own family in which I was an extra. Surprisingly, even Steve's daughter treated me with contempt from the first day, although I couldn't do her any harm. One day, my mom woke me up with a bag in my hands and told me to lock the house. I sleepily went to do it and saw Steve in the car with his daughter Lena and travel supplies. I started asking my mom in a panic, "Why are they going on vacation without me? How many days did they go for? Where did they go?" The response was icy silence. She just got in the car. Steve started it up, and they drove off without even turning in my direction. That was the last straw. I packed up all my things and called my father to tell him everything that had been happening to me all these years, and finally leave this horrible and cold place, where I had always been and would always be unwanted. Leaving the house, I didn't close it on purpose. I didn't care. No matter if I was good or bad, I was hated here. There was no point in trying for these people. My father became suspicious as soon as I contacted him, because all this time we saw each other only on certain days, which they agreed with my mom. I told him everything that had happened to me over the years. In the middle of the story, I realized how much pain I had kept inside me all this time, how much horror I had experienced alone, and I just started crying without stopping. When I finished the story, my father hugged me and said, "You will never be alone again. I will take you away. This hell will end." After a week of living with my dad, my mom called me and started screaming from the first seconds of the conversation that it was my fault that Lena's bike had been stolen and Steve's expensive rubber for the car had been stolen. At this point, I was incredibly hurt again. Not because my mother was insulting and blaming me for everything, but because she had left her son home alone at home for a week and never once contacted him to see how he was doing, how he was feeling, if he had eaten. She didn't care. So I responded in a calm tone, completely ignoring everything she said, that I was now living with my father and had no plans to go back. The next day, my dad, after meeting with my mom, told me why Steve had hated me all this time. When my mom started dating Steve, he suggested that we move in together as a big family, but my mom didn't want to see his daughter because she would remind her of his ex-wife and that would make her angry and jealous. So my mom shifted all the responsibility to me and started lying to Steve constantly over the years that I hated him, hated his daughter, and that I was aggressive and it was better for my daughter to live with him for a while. After a week of living with my dad, my mother called me and started screaming from the first seconds of the conversation that it was my fault that Lena's bike had been stolen and Steve's expensive rubber for his car had been stolen. At this point, I was incredibly hurt again. Not because my mother was insulting and blaming me for everything, but because she had left her son home alone at home for a week and never once contacted him to see how he was doing, how he was feeling, if he had eaten. She didn't care. So I responded in a calm tone, completely ignoring everything she said, that I was now living with my father and had no plans to go back. The next day, my dad, after meeting with my mom, told me why Steve had hated me all this time. When my mom started dating Steve, he suggested that we move in together as a big family, but my mom didn't want to see his daughter because she would remind her of his ex-wife, and that would make her angry and jealous, so my mom shifted all the responsibility to me and started lying to Steve constantly over the years that I hated him, hated his daughter, and that I was aggressive, and it was better for daughter to live with him for all. Then they say that Steve there, in this coat stone, when I got used to him, then I could try to live as a big family. It was because of the constant lies from my mom that Steve was angry with me every day because he thought that I was the reason for their unhappy life, that I wanted to destroy their relationship. My father, when he realized what had been going on all this time, was furious. He filed for full custody of me, and he won. The court took into account that my mother had been emotionally abusive for years. We had evidence, letters, correspondence, confessions. Her lawyer stalled, but she didn't stand a chance. Now I live with my father. I no longer have to go to my mother's house if I don't want to. Yes, she still has official visitation rights, but I'm not going to use them. I don't want to suffer again. I want to start a new life. A few months passed. Life slowly started to get better. I smiled more often. My studies went up. I made more friends. My father and I became closer in ways I had never dreamed of before. He supported me, took an interest in my life, helped me when it was difficult. We started having nights out with pizza, movies, or board games. Small rituals, but they meant a lot to me. And then one day I got a letter from my mother. I recognized her handwriting immediately. She wrote that she'd realized how wrong she'd been, that she'd acted out of fear, that she couldn't cope with her new life, her new family, that I reminded her of the past she'd tried to escape. She said she didn't mean to hurt, but alas, she did. And that she regretted it every day now, asked for forgiveness, asked for a chance to talk. I read the letter with a stone in my chest. I felt a tightness inside. Do children often receive such a confession from their parents? I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to just tear the letter up. Another wanted to believe it. But I didn't respond. Not because I hated her, but because I realized sometimes forgiveness isn't a conversation, it's a release inside. I'm not mad at her anymore. I just don't want to go back to the place where I felt bad. Let each of us go our separate ways.